Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Of course, the Hydra t-shirt is out, which can mean only one thing. We are back with the MCU Retrospective after I gave a little bit more time, having watched Black Widow, and I thought, well, we can't have, older Marvel film, new Marvel film, in too quick a succession, but here we are, the final stretch. We are now deep into Phase 3, and the themes that I've been talking about the last couple of weeks, primarily about Phase 3, are starting to really open up and coming to fruition. Because Ragnarok is the definition of individual character movies becoming, evolving into sort of their most ambitious form. Of course, we saw that with Civil War by having it essentially be an Avengers film, and you see a very different variation of this with Thor Ragnarok. There is something quite culminating about it. Because it does... There is something about it. There is something, an aspect where Thor Ragnarok is incredibly close to being a massive mess of a film that collapses in on its own ambition and foundations, where there's just so much going on and so much inserted that you could just see it imploding. And yet, it manages to carry off something so great and with such scale. I mean, I am of course a Lord of the Rings generation cinema goer, so anything that results in a giant battle with our characters engaged in very specific elements, it definitely appeals to that style of mythos, and that was something that Dark World never really had. I mean, if you go back to Thor 1 had no scale. It was supposed to be, the sort of, the out of place character, and as I said at the time, I was actually quite shocked how much world building existed, setting up what Asgard looked like, the frost giants. There was that sense of like a myth to it, and that sense of scale and history, as well as the kooky fish out of water comedy stuff with Thor and Earth. But again, it wasn't. It was more character scale. It was more, yes, you had the ice giants sort of attack on Asgard, and you had the Thor versus the Destroyer, but again, it was kept, quite low key, quite not low budget, but low, quite self-contained. The Dark World tries to expand, and it just doesn't. I mean, there are things that it's funny. There are parallels between this and the Dark World that work so much better here. For instance, the escape from Sakaar when they're on that ship, and you've got Valkyrie jumping around trying to sort of defeat individual ships. You've got Thor and Banner who don't have any weapons, and so the only thing they can think to do is fire off fireworks. And weirdly, that parallels the escape from Asgard in Dark World, where you have Thor and Loki, and obviously you've got Heimdall and Sif and the Warrior 3 all trying to do different things to enable an escape. And yet, I don't know, Dark World, as I said, there's something very flat about Dark World. There's something very almost TV scale, and I know that's being a little bit dismissive of the director, who is known for TV work. Whereas this has a certain 3 dimensions to it. This has that sense of cinematic scale where you feel like, I want to see this on the biggest screen possible. And yeah, and I think that sort of carries through the whole film, and that's where it elevates from Dark World, where, I mean, yes, there are certain aspects that I think they go for more basic storytelling elements, but they stack them with so much else that you don't notice. For instance, a character losing their power, essentially, going back to being, spark fingers. And that's something I didn't notice, is sort of the arc, the sense that Thor has the hammer destroyed. The Grandmaster refers to him, he does that spark fingers, and sort of really diminishes him, and makes him like nothing. His weakest possible self. And then, of course, the arc being that, not only am I going to reach the strength that I had originally, I'm going to surpass that, and, have strength, a power that I never even realised within myself. And of course that is a very traditional arc, especially in that kind of story, in that kind of classic mythic storytale style. And then you have, the sort of long lost sister, and you could say, well, isn't that a little bit super operatic? And again, yes, you could say that, and that would be a legitimate criticism. And yet, the way they line up, it really feels... It knows how to blend. And it's funny because, obviously, Nordic, but for the sake of what I'm going to say, the Greek style of storytelling, that classic Greek, gods and monsters style, very metamorphoses, that sense of sort of grand history is in place. You have the MCU stuff with, Doctor Strange and Hulk and Banner and all the references to the Avengers, and that's also there. And then you also have these sort of weird sci-fi 80s set Masters of the Universe, the last what was it, the last space pilot, what is that the name of the film? The Last Starfighter, that's the one. The Last Starfighter. And you have that weird 80s, which has a sort of camp and very spark kind of aesthetic to it, and yet what you do is you take these three elements and you just squash them together, and they seem to work so well. I mean, I remember seeing the trailer for this and having that sort of the music coming, the dun 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 dun, and then you have the, like I said, the very 80s titles flying into the screen, very Flash Gordon style. And then, and there's just something about it that feels like it's a callback to an era, and yet could only have existed now, and could only have existed within the 30 years, following the 30-year cycle. And yes, there is the other aspect of it, which at this point is coming up time and time again, and I talked about it quite extensively with Guardians of the Galaxy, where, of course, the Marvel formula at this point is the bathos, that is, using humour to undermine moments that might be slightly too self-grandiose and to, moments of great importance, sort of undercutting it with a character beat or a joke. And by the time of it didn't really exist until the Avengers film. You got a little bit in the Iron Man, but that was more because of the characters who were there. The Avengers is the point when it started to be really seeded into the plot. But by Phase 3, it becomes sort of such a, heavy thing within the storytelling that people really start to be affected by it and go, oh, you take these dramatic moments, these story beats, and you just undermine them with so much humour and jokes. And I said that in Guardians, it was a real problem. I think here, it only creates a problem, I'd say, maybe at the beginning and at the end. At the beginning because, we did need a sense of mythos to it, but the way it decides to open is more with humour and then a big action set piece, whereas to Dark World's credit, it did open with that sense of mythos and, and narration and scale to it. And you get the sort of inference where Thor talks about where he's been, the journey he's been on, the confrontation with Surtur. And so you get that sense of, okay, so it exists, but it's sort of written in a way that it's focusing on the comedy. And then, of course, the comedy seeds straight into the big opening fight to, establish the strength of the characters. And yet, it could have done with a stronger opening in that respect. And then the ending. And as I say, there are just... Not wanting to spoil it, because again, there could be someone in the world who's never seen Thor Ragnarok. It's very possible. But, when you get to the big climactic moment, and there's this, both shocking and horrifying and yet necessary thing that happens at the very end of the film, and you think, wow, that is a really significant moment in the character's story, in the story of sort of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. This is a huge shift. Let's take this as a moment. And what they do is they decide to have a character essentially undermine it with a huge comedy well, not a comedy set piece, like a joke. It is just one joke, but it's so sort of immersed itself within that moment that it completely takes away the pathos of this moment and replaces it with bathos. And I think, yes, that's a problem. But to its credit, and as going forward, I'm fairly confident that with the exception of Guardians and with this, I think this is the worst examples of it. And going forwards to where we end up with at the end of our journey of the retrospective, I'm willing to bet that you don't see it half as much as we think we do, as much as we think we remember, that actually, they learned lessons from Ragnarok and from Guardians Volume 2, and they went, okay, we will have these moments of humour, and yes, we will sort of take moments where characters are being a little bit too self-important and cut them with humour, but major plot beats we will give that sense of importance and pathos to it. I might be wrong, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but that's where I'm going to stake my claim on it. And yeah, it's great. It's a great film. I mean, I've already talked extensively. Thor's great. Loki's great. Loki gets his own TV series following this, so of course he's and Thor has the next film coming up. And this introduces Tessa Thompson, Taika Waititi as Korg. And you just it's such a good ensemble. And even though you have things like the Doctor Strange scene where it was advertised, as at the end of Doctor Strange, implies that he's going to be a major part of the film. He's not. It makes me worried about Spider-Man No Way Home, where they say, oh, Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch are going to be prominent parts of it, but I do wonder if it's going to be something like here, where it's essentially a cameo. And of course, the major arc with Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and I think this is, I know this is the next huge arc of the Hulk that we'll see from this point. If you broke the story of Bruce Banner and the Hulk into two arcs, you have the beginning of the Avengers films, the Incredible Hulk, if you want to count that, right through to Age of Ultron. And I think you get one arc there that has a beginning, middle, and end. And then here you have a different arc, and you have the weird relationship between Banner and the Hulk that will go from here all the way through to Endgame. Now, admittedly, what we will see is that really dropping the ball, particularly as we get to the end of Infinity War and particularly into Endgame, that it's one of the biggest letdowns in terms of arcs and characters, and really does a disservice to where I think we collectively thought the character of the Hulk was going. But here, we don't know that yet at Ragnarok, and the idea of seeing the Hulk and essentially getting the closest to Planet Hulk that we can get is great. Whether it's true or not that Universal still have the rights to the Hulk and not allowed to make a solo Hulk film, despite the fact that Kevin Feige says they are. Who knows? These behind doors conversations are not something we get access to. But it's in the unlikely event that we're ever going to get a Planet Hulk film or a solo Hulk film at all. This is as good as you can get. This is pretty awesome. This is an awesome way to do that story. And and it's just, it gives something that, again, Dark World I felt may have missed. And yes, Dark World was trying to be like the original Thor, standalone, not have too many links to the bigger MCU. And yet, this doesn't. This double downs on it. And I think that might have been the better call as things stand. No, I think Ragnarok is a great film. It is, without doubt, the best of the Thor trilogy. It just, to me, it just capitalises on everything we love about these characters and the direction they've gone. And yes, there is an argument to be made that Thor goes from... The humour of Thor was originally the fact that he stood out in a crowd. He had this, He acted like classic Thor in modern age, and that's where the humour came from, but he played it straight. Whereas by the time we get to Ragnarok, he's making jokes, references, he's very self-aware. yes, I've seen that criticism come up before. I don't care. I think this. I like this version of Hulk. Hulk, blimmin' heck. I like this version of Thor. I like the character as he stands. I think they balance the humour for him with the sadness. And again, talking about arcs from here through to Endgame, again, you're going to see him go on a real hard journey. And yeah, it's great. It's great, and yeah, it's just, I mean, we've got Love and Thunder coming sometime soon, so looking forward to that. But yeah, for now, this is sort of, I mean, okay, Infinity War and Endgame, so we're not going to see Hulk, Thor, or Hulk, both of whom we're going to get quite a lot of them in the next coming films. But in terms of standalone, this is the end of the Thor trilogy for now. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it will help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded, and check out my back catalogue of practically 200. We are only a couple of videos away now. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting about TV shows, films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.